From Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan alongside my partner, the Professor Luigi Rosabianca. What's on tap today, Lou?
Matt, not all podcast guests are created equal, and I've got a feeling today's going to be a special one. Today on the podcast, we've got Eric Youngstrom. He's going to delve into his illustrious career, and he is taking over the e-commerce lending space. Eric, welcome to the podcast. Tell us, how did a guy like you get involved in e-commerce and the entrepreneurial spirit that you have?
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate being here today, guys. It's a pleasure and an honor. I got into the e-commerce world in 2012 by helping to launch a company called Shipping Easy, which was an order aggregation and shipping software solution for e-commerce SMBs, right? Guys who were just starting out, up until guys with, I don't know, 5,000, 6,000, maybe 10,000 packages a month that they had to go ship. During our time there, I worked with 30 or 40,000 merchants. We were acquired by a group called stamps.com in 2016. I went and ran global BD for them, spent 4 years with them, and, got a chance to work with, then hundreds of thousands of these small business merchants across kind of a partner network of about 500 partners who were using their technology, and really fell in love with the SMB space, specifically the e-commerce SMB space, because I'd been in enterprise software long before then, and no one ever gets really excited about helping AT&T's earnings per share go up a penny. But when a customer calls you and says, "Hey, because of you, I could quit my day job and just run my own business," there's something, cyclically rewarding about that, right? You feel really good about knowing that you're actually letting somebody kind of achieve their own independence. So post-acquisition by Stamps, I was, I still have this startup bug in me. I like doing the early stage businesses. I like where you're kind of going from 0 to 1, and saw the challenges that our merchants were facing with cash flow, right? These are not companies that are going to be VC financed. They're really bootstrapped. They're going to have to do this out of their own money. Maybe there's an uncle or an aunt who invests $15,000, $20,000, right? But you're not really getting people who are getting even 6-figure checks. And so cash flow becomes the biggest challenge for an e-commerce business, because they have to go fund an inventory purchase, right? That's going to drive 3 months of sales, and they're going to get that money back over that 3 months in terms of, one sale at a time. But where do you come up with that $30,000 or $100,000 to buy that 90 days worth of inventory? And so the premise was we could go in and we could look at the order flow data of a business, that we could look at their banking data and use that to uniquely underwrite in just minutes, using, data streams that come from a source of truth like Amazon or Shopify, that mean we actually have, known good data to go make good decisions on, who to lend to, the amounts to lend, and kind of the repayment velocity that we should expect. So we could build a really rich credit model, and simultaneously then just help more of these small business merchants. And then finally, I think e-commerce as an SMB tool, right, kind of didn't launch really effectively until about 2010. So we're talking about an industry that, for SMBs at least, is truly, 15, maybe 20 years old. So the picks and shovels of this industry are still being built, right? We're still figuring out what are the optimal ways to do things. And so I just thought there was a big opportunity to come in and think about lending exclusively for e-commerce, looking at these things just from an e-commerce perspective.
That's awesome. So you guys, who would ever thought you can go out and build a lending institution data first?
You do what?
You can go out and build a lending institution data first, data driven first.
Well, I mean, Experian thinks it, right? I just don't know how many people have done it outside of them. But that was the beauty of sitting at Shipping Easy, right? Because I'm looking at the same data streams I've been using for a decade now, or 12 years now, And so that was kind of the premise, right? That hold on, there's just a ton of data in the order volume that you can then use to go build a different perspective on, working capital.
Yeah, and the fact that you guys can move so quickly because you're tapped into the other e-commerce platforms, you're seeing what real-time orders are looking like,
Yep.
right? And you're seeing the historical trends there, right? Most other companies in the lending space, and we know because me and Luigi are in it, don't even do that. I mean, you have competitors out there, right?
Yep.
What separates you from, well, we know Amazon just shut down their lending department, right?
Right.
For e-com. So everybody else is looking for a new home. Everybody start going to Onramp because they're going to be your white knight, so to speak, because Amazon's out of the game. But with that being said, Shopify's done it. I mean, Square's done it with their restaurants. What makes you guys different at OnRamp?
Well, I think, let's talk about Shopify. They're a great product, but they're a product that's channel specific. So you sell on Shopify. Shopify sees that order volume, sees the consistency of sales, right? They have all that information so they can go make you an offer. But Amazon doesn't share the Amazon order data with Shopify. WooCommerce won't share their data with Shopify, right? They're competitors for that retail decision. And so because of that, if you are a multi-channel seller, and 82% of e-commerce business owners are, Shopify becomes channel financing as opposed to, your full working capital need. And so because we're not competing to go drive consumer sales, right? We're just competing to go provide financing that then empowers that merchant within Shopify or within Amazon or wherever else they sell. We're really a complement to Shopify. Yes, we compete for that specific product line, but if that merchant takes money from us, they're still driving their sales in Shopify, and I'm not taking that away from Shopify. And so I think, from that perspective, we offer a little bit what you'd call more holistic financing. Now, if you only sell on Shopify, then, Shopify is a great product for you, right? Because that's your only channel. In terms of kind of the more traditional products or, using Square, we don't finance restaurants. I don't know how to manage that. And restaurants have been around for hundreds of years in this country, right? Like grocery stores and things like that, where there are actually really, rich tools out there that have been built over decades that you really, now know the kind of the risk parameters, right? And so I think, going back to that kind of idea of building picks and shovels for a new industry, restaurants aren't new, dry cleaners aren't new, auto mechanics aren't new, right? They've been around for a long time. And I think those are solved problems. E-commerce is new. The average retail turnover cycle is more like 6 months because of seasonal trends, and you're having to go manage inventory across locations, whereas the average e-commerce inventory turnover cycle is 52 days. And so you just have a much tighter cash conversion cycle, which then warrants a more focused and custom built loan product than maybe some of the traditional off-the-shelf solutions that are one size fits all SMB.
Eric, let's talk about those picks and shovels that you mentioned. As a good entrepreneur, you were able to articulate your business model in a perfect elevator pitch. But I think it's a bit more complex. I would imagine there's very robust infrastructure behind what you do. Kind of help the audience lift the hood and give us an idea of what it takes to run a company like you. I mean, do you have rooms full of servers? Do you have in-house IT guys? Are you able to outsource everything? Walk us through your infrastructure without telling us the special sauce.
Yeah, we have built all our own code from the ground up. So I'm blessed in that our product and engineering team, I think all but one of us have been together since Shipping Easy, right? So we're 9 of us have been working together now for 12 years, building software solutions for the e-commerce SMB segment.
Eric, you're doing a very elegant copy and paste. I love it.
Hey, listen,
it's true.
But listen, we all know people buy from who they know, like, and trust. But what people forget is you work with who you know, like, and trust, and people that are competent, right? So, I mean, that says a lot. And as far as an investor goes, when I see a team that was successful be purchased by another team and then move on and stick together, I want to invest in that team because it's not really the product at the end of the day.
Well, the team's going to be the group that gets the product through, come hell or high water and through the fire and everything else. To your point around an elegant copy and paste, mean, look, we're using the same data feeds we used at Shipping Easy to go process orders and create shipping labels. We're using them for a different use case. The beauty of that then is, as we've been building out our infrastructure, we actually get to look back on 10 years of, okay, great, here are the mistakes we made and the lessons learned. Let's skip those. And so, what took 8 years last time is probably taken 2 years to get the same quality of infrastructure at a far lower cost, because, a lot of that is a copy and paste exercise. I mean, it's not identical, right? But certainly you're just coming with immense knowledge on how to go do this from day one. Now, the funny thing is, we're all a bunch of software guys. None of us had lending experience. So that's the part of the world that we've been having to learn the hard way. And trying to then bring in, new members of the team that actually have that experience and exposure to complement the software and go-to-market capabilities that the rest of the team had.
Do you find that your firm Onramp focuses on certain e-commerce industries and trades? Is it retail? Is it SaaS firms? Or basically, if you're on e-commerce, we'll lend?
If you're in e-commerce, we'll lend so long as it's legal.
Of course.
We've had some people do some interesting things. Yeah. So as long as, and we're not here to pick or choose, I don't have a moral perspective on what you sell, so long as that the U.S. federal governments and state governments have agreed that it's okay. I'm just going to say yes, so long as you got the sales velocity and history, right, to demonstrate it. We're a little more careful with like perishables. We do like to see more time in business there, because if you're selling flowers or cookies, those things go bad, and if they go bad, there's no recovery. And so we do want to see a little bit more traction in that space, just that we're more confident that you know how to keep that turnover going and manage for that risk. We're starting to delve into a little bit more of the digital e-commerce space, not NFTs or things like that, but more just kind of digital products where you have less of a cost of goods sold. So your working capital need is different, right? We're not here to be a capital investor, right? We're not an investor in your business. We're a lender, right? We're providing cash for kind of a 30-day to 180-day cycle. And we're matching that cycle to your cash conversion cycle and your inventory turnovers and kind of supply chain timelines. And so from that perspective, right, I think we're doing something that's it's built for how e-commerce works in an optimal fashion.
Eric, let's dive in there for a second, right? Because you're in for 30 to 180 days. Okay. Cost of capital is the cost of capital, right? How would you explain it to somebody with an e-com that says, hey, your money's way too expensive, but they don't really see the other end of it? If they do have an investor come in that takes equity in the company and your company grows, that equity never goes away. They're in there for as long as you need them, right? So what would you say to that investor? Because you've been on both ends, right?
Right.
You started at Shipping. You deal with investors, you deal with venture capitalists, right? And you guys are strictly a lender, right? What do you see as the pros and the cons of bringing an investor on to what you guys are doing where you're at?
Look, if you're bringing an investor on, you are bringing in a co-owner. And in fact, they only go away if somebody else buys them out. And if that somebody else isn't you, then you're still going to have a co-owner. It's just a different co-owner, and it may be a worse co-owner. If you can buy them out, great. You've bought your business back. We're not an investor. We're not taking an equity position. We don't have a vote in how you run the business. The only vote we have is in getting repaid. And so, I think in that regard, we're far less expensive than equity. We come with much less headaches than equity. I think the other part of that conversation on the price of our capital, one, our customers are on average sub 5 million in revenue. And we have customers that are at their first $3,000 in 30-day revenue. So this is definitionally a high risk segment, right? It's an unfortunate reality. There's a tremendous infant mortality rate when it comes to small businesses. And so you have to be able to price for that. On top of that, we've built a software application that figures out what to deploy, how much, when, how to draw down, automates all of that. And if you could get a traditional line of credit, which most of these guys aren't qualified for a bank, they're actually going to have to make the decision. When do I draw? how do I pay back? How do I make sure I paid enough of that credit line back so that when I need that next batch of cash, it's there for me, and it hasn't been misallocated and spent on something that now I can't go get more inventory because I don't have the cash on hand necessary to do that. To do that, you typically are going to hire a finance person. And let's just assume you could get an affordable finance person. Well, that guy's going to cost affordably $10K a month. And when you layer in that cost of somebody to manage it against my cost of capital, we actually are dirt cheap because we're not charging nearly that much. On top of that, we're not taking an equity position or ownership position where you're actually you're giving up part of your business and the control there. And if you want to slow things down and you've reached a sustainable point where you're like, look, I can now fund this out of profits, you get to say goodbye, right? And if you decide, hey, I want to scale again, you get to come right back and say, I'm ready for more. And we're here for you. So, it's our goal to help as many merchants as we can get their business to sustainability. It's not my job to define what sustainability is, right? That could be $1 million a year with a 20% profit margin. That could be $5 million a year with a 10% profit margin. Wherever that number is, I want those merchants to achieve that so that they're living the American dream. It's my job to do the best I can to help them. And then there are going to be those guys who say, you know what, I want to be $1 billion business. Somewhere between 5 and 20 million in revenue, you have no choice but to hire a CFO. The business demands it. When at that point in time, you shouldn't work with me anymore. That person should be going to a bank, get your books in order, get your financials in order, negotiating with 4 or 5 banks to get one of them to say yes, and then managing that. And from my perspective, I celebrate that. It's that customer has graduated. They've gone on to the next stage of business. They no longer need us. They're going to have a team that's bigger and broader, and they're that much more sustainable and likely to go on to be a multi-generational business. I think that's phenomenal.
Now, Eric, prior to that graduation, I would imagine that first year startup grows. How does your platform grow with the merchant? Let's say they take the first tranche, but they've paid that off and now they need more money for more inventory. How do you renew those lines with the client?
Yeah. So, the beauty of our model is there's not much in the way of manual process. The most painful manual part of this process in working with Onramp is submitting your business verification documents. Connecting your Amazon account, it's an OAuth configuration, right? It's like signing into Amazon and authorizing us. It's 3 clicks, you're done. Connecting your bank account is Plaid, right? It's 3 clicks, you're done. With that, then we're pulling all that data in every day. And so we underwrite our customers every single night so that we know tomorrow when we come in the office, if they're going to ask for more money, we already know what we can do for them, right? And if they ask for less than we've already authorized, it's really easy to say, great, yeah, we were ready to give you 100K, you're only asking for 50, go, right? If they come in and say, hey, I need 120, well, I have an account management team that then works with them, the underwriting team, to see if we can go customize an offer to get them that little bit of extra that then we kind of just had as the default. The beauty of looking at that order data on a daily basis is, if you borrowed from me when you were doing 50,000 a month in revenue, and you're coming back 3 months later, and now you're doing 60%, or call it 55,000 in monthly revenue, well, you've got 10% more capacity, right? And 3 months later, you're at 60, right? You got another 10% capacity. And so we're always looking at up to the minute data and then forecasting off of that to say what this business is going to do and how it's going to perform so that we can extend more capital. Because, if you're selling more, you're capturing more demand, you're going to want more inventory so you can keep up with that demand and actually find out what is the maximum demand that you can sustainably own. And that's where your business caps, right? Until you add more products. And so from our perspective, right, our average customer grows about 75% to 100% their first year, and they do it again their second year. And it's because of the capital insertion, right? Without us, the debt position that these merchants use is credit cards, right? That's pretty much it. And a credit card is based on their personal borrowing capacity. It doesn't reflect what their business does. And so I think that's where we're really coming in and doing something different that says, hey, look, we're here to underwrite your business. You're a CEO, you've built a real business. We're going to treat you like a real CEO with a real business and give you real business tools that prior to this would have been kind of, you'd have to be 20 or 30 million in revenue and up before you get access to tools like this.
So that's your competitive advantage. It's
Yeah.
a frictionless IT platform. Beautiful. Now,
Lou, I don't think people understand the how powerful that is, right? Especially that they're dealing with businesses that are just starting up. They're a couple months in business. You go to a bank's not going to lend you any money, right? They don't care what the business is selling. You don't have the time in business. They're not going to deal with you. But more importantly, and this is where it gets interesting, and it's a secret sauce that they have is, first of all, I've seen your rates. Your rates are not bad at all. They are actually probably the best that I have ever seen. And I'm not saying that just to say it. It's the truth. The rates are good, but the fact that you could have more capital without going through and having another, let's call it blood exam, sitting down with a banker, waiting 30 days overnight is phenomenal, right? You can't get that anywhere else. So I'm waiting for you guys to expand outside of e-com, because that's what we got to talk about. Rural service-based businesses, if there's a way. But what you guys are doing is amazing.
Well, thank you. No, I mean, I think it's true, right? Like, if you think about going to a bank, the very first thing you want to see is your driver's license. Like, who am I talking to? Pardon me, I should have turned that off. Who are you talking? They want to know who they're talking to. Then they're going to start asking for financials and all this other stuff. And 90 to 180 days later, more often than not, they're going to tell you no. When you come to Onramp, the first thing you do is connect your Amazon store. Well, okay, that's 3 clicks. We're going to then give you an initial pre-qualification number that tells you, is it worth continuing? If it is, connect your bank. Great. Now I can fully underwrite you. And I will fully underwrite you before I actually know who you are. And I will come back with, here is a fully available offer contingent upon now business and consumer identity verification. And so the last thing we do is actually get the driver's license, the Secretary of State filing, the EIN. And that's where we go in and then do all our identity verification, for anti-fraud, money laundering, and a lot of other kind of stuff, right? You have to be compliant with US federal law. But we actually, what we're trying to do is inform the merchant through each step if there is enough value for them to want to continue to take the next step. And if not, great, we understand. We may not be a fit for every business out there. But what we're trying to do is minimize the time investment to get to that next step so that you can feel like you're not wasting time. And again, we're talking minutes, right? Like, you could get through my process end to end before you get into your car, get to a bank, get out of the car, and get into the lobby, let alone finally talk to somebody.
Eric, before e-commerce lending was a twinkle in your eye, there was a young buck consultant over at Deloitte. Help us.
It's a long time ago, man.
Yeah, exactly. Help us connect those dots. How did you go from Deloitte to e-commerce?
I tried to be an entrepreneur out of college, and I failed miserably. I did it in a city where I knew nobody, and it was Denver. And it was at a time where in Silicon Valley, failure wasn't penalized. You learn from it, right? And people would look to that and say, hey, great, well, he's learned something, and we're going to reward failure because that's how you get to the success. When you're alone and there's no network around you, that failure is kind of demoralizing. And so I got really fortunate that I was bright enough to get into grad school and got to go to UT for an MBA. And I just decided, look, I'm going to go get professional. And so I came out of UT. Deloitte offered me a job. I spent 4 years with them. And, I think I learned an enormous amount to a point where I think Deloitte gave me more than I could have possibly given them. And so I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity to be a part of that team. Always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I wanted another shot at it. Simultaneously, also kind of didn't view consulting as a lifestyle I wanted if I was going to be married. And I got engaged. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to leave Deloitte. I can't do 50 weeks on the road, 50 weeks a year on the road anymore. It's too much. And so I went to work at a broadband startup here in Austin in 2004 at Motive. I spent a couple of years there, learned a ton. I think, again, probably learned more from them than I was able to give them back. And then I was asked to join an identity protection company in 2006 as the very first employee. Only like a third of the way through their fundraising, I joined. So I got to see things from, day zero. And it was an amazing experience. I learned so much from Bill and Joe and the team. I was there for 6 years, kind of helped get the business about 30 million in revenue, and wanted to go back to early stage. And so went to Shipping Easy, which was kind of that same space as, well, not the same space, but the same stage as CS Identity when I first joined it in 2006. And so I did it again. And was blessed to have both of those get to successful exits for me. And then, spent that time at Stamps, but knew that I'd want to go back into, taking a stab at really founding and starting my own again. And so I as I was, working with these merchants and partners in the e-commerce space, knew that e-commerce is this incredibly psychically rewarding industry, right? To get to help small business owners and to hear from them that you've really made a difference for them, right? Felt personally really good. And it really, I grew up in a small town without any big businesses. And so the guys who were coaching Little League were the, Rungy Auto Glass, right? And door glass, and here's the mechanic, right? And so it was all these small business owners, and the independence they had and the ability to run a business, but still, at 3:00 in the afternoon, go coach Little League or things like that was really cool. And so I just think that's the American spirit. I think, the more small businesses, the more independent business owners we have, the healthier, the freer, the safer our world is. And so the beauty of Onramp is I get to try to build a business, a successful business that actually generates returns for investors while simultaneously kind of, fulfilling just a mission of trying to make the world a better place in a way that I think makes sense, which then makes it really easy every day to get up and go through the grind when things aren't going the way you want them to.
Eric, I'm curious, that business that failed in Denver, what type of industry was that?
Oh, it's coffee. So it's 95. I finished college. I'm kind of screwing around, and I take a job from 2 to 10 every afternoon, slinging coffee at Seattle's Best Coffee in Green Lake. Like literally watching Sean Kemp, in the off season play basketball in the parking lot. And it was a fun time to be in coffee in Seattle. And I'm like, those little coffee carts sitting outside of the Nordstrom was generating $1.5 million in revenue a year from a cart. It was open from 6 to 2. And I'm like, I can do this, but first mistake, Seattle, I said, Seattle's saturated with coffee. Oh my God, it's, so wrong. It's got like 5 times many coffee shops today as it did in 95. I went to Denver. I'm like, well, Denver's cold. Seattle's cold. That's going to work. No, cold doesn't sell coffee. Clouds sell coffee. Denver's sunny year round. So yes, it's cold out, but when you get that sunshine, it just wakes you up. It perks you up. It makes you happy. Seattle sucks to live in Seattle. It's gray for 9 months straight. The coffee is what perks you up. And so just
that's why the Brits drink tea.
Pardon?
That's why the Brits drink tea, right?
Exactly. And the other thing, as I had enough time to look back on that failure, I also recognized that I missed a huge opportunity in the wholesale side, that I failed on the retail side, but I'd actually built kind of a really cool set of wholesale relationships and network that would have actually let me go do something. But again, in my youth, my inexperience, my frustration, I couldn't see it at the time, right? So getting a chance to step back and have the time with Deloitte where you could really look back over the early career failures, you can learn a lot, right? And then getting back into the startup world, all of a sudden, I viewed going to Motive and every startup ever after that as an apprenticeship opportunity. It was my chance to go learn from people who were building successful startups and who had built successful startups before each of these, where I was like, well, great, I'll go learn from people who've been there, done that, which will then increase my odds of success when it's my time to go do that again. And so, I think I've been just really blessed in the opportunities I've been able to pursue and the teams that I've been able to work with.
Eric, do you think it's coincidental that your fondness as a child for small business owners have led you to industries where you're constantly supplying the picks and shovels to those small business owners?
No, I think it wasn't intentional always, but I think there has been a lot of that. And
the universe is pushing you in that direction.
It is. Yeah, no, I don't think I was consciously doing it, but I think subconsciously that's kind of what was happening. And now it's become a conscious motion, right? Like I like building tools for, business owners. Yeah.
So Onramp is ramping up, excuse the pun. What happens next? What's your next stage with Onramp? What's your exit strategy?
again, we're building this to be a long-term successful business. If the opportunity arises that there's an acquirer and the price is right, of course, we would never, we wouldn't turn that away. If the opportunity is to grow this thing to be a public company, we'll pursue that. If it makes more sense to grow this to be, a very, very large, successful private company, we'll do that, right? I've got a board, I've got investors, we, collaboratively work on what those strategies are and what those outcomes ought to be. Right now, we're in that building stage where we're maximizing the value that we're building. So, I want to get as much time as I can to keep building the value into the business before we really make that next decision. But between here and there, we'll see what happens.
So, Eric, you've helped personally a ton of businesses, and every single day at Onramp, you're continuing to help more businesses. What are the 3 top mistakes that you see these business owners consistently make?
Hiring brutally hard, either not hiring when they ought to, or if they are hiring the wrong people. And I think ultimately, I think we've been really lucky here at Onramp. I heard a stat, like half of all hires are wrong, right? And there's just no getting around it, which means then you have to be able to change directions quickly once you can identify that you made a mistake in the hiring process. If you can reduce that ratio, even better. I think the next one is just really not planning for the actual cost of running the business. It's always more than you think it's going to be. And so every entrepreneur has to have optimistic rose-colored glasses on. Simultaneously, you have to have a realistic view as well. And you probably need to go run a model that says, here's my optimistic view and here's my downside view. And how do I run through both of these so that I've got a plan, right? I think you need to have, here's my plan, but here's plan B, plan C, plan D, so that, what you're not doing is reacting. What you're doing is implementing, based on the facts on the ground. And so you've been proactive around what could happen, which means, when the facts tell you to do something, you're able to go implement a plan that you've already been thoughtful about, and you're not caught kind of in your back foot. So I think those 2 things are big. And then there's a not listening in the market and a listening in the market. It's funny. We have a lot of customers who tell us they want a longer term. I want 1 year working capital. I think those customers are wrong. I think, Steve Jobs was right when he said customers don't know what they want. And, the reason specifically, I think that when a customer says they want a 1 year working capital line, well, if your inventory is turning over, make it easy, 4 times a year, why are you borrowing 4 times more today than you need? You're going to have to pay a cost of capital for that. You're going to have compound interest on money you can't deploy for 90, 180, 270 days. Because you're borrowing more, you're going to have a bigger fee because there's a bigger deployment risk, and you've increased the fee for a duration perspective. And so we've been trained from birth, right, that the lower the mortgage rate for the 30-year term is what you absolutely want. And that's true in a house, right? It's not always appreciating, but in general, it holds its value and it can appreciate. And it's got at least a 30-year, if not 50-year useful life in it. Inventory doesn't, right? And you're going to need more inventory. And if you're selling faster, you're going to need it even sooner. And so borrow it when you need it. Find a partner who's willing to give you more on demand. Take the amount you need today, and tomorrow when you need more, come back for that. But don't take 6 months from now when you're not ready to deploy it. It's just a misallocation of funds, and it's going to bring in additional fees. And so I think, from an entrepreneur looking at the 3 things you got to do, there are times when you have to listen to the market, and there's times you just got to say, hold on, that's wrong. And I'm going to do this differently. And I might, fight the headwaters for a while, but I think the market will eventually come around and say, hold on, this is an optimal solution that better aligns with the business, and that de-risks my business.
Eric, in a highly fractured industry, such as small business lending, you and your team have been able to carve out a beautiful niche. But the question remains, were you ever able to coach your kids' softball teams?
I was a Pop Warner football coach for a couple of seasons. I did flag football coaching. I did volleyball coaching and basketball coaching. I was able to do those things. Yes. My
So
daughter's a
look,
freshman in college, so I don't get to do it anymore.
Good for you.
Yeah. I will say I was not a very good football coach. I never played football as a kid. So what I told the head coach is I'm a pair of hands that will keep the kids in the right place at the right time. And you just tell me what to say. But it was my chance to be with my boy. Right. And do good father-son stuff and father-daughter stuff. So yeah.
That's awesome. What do you do for fun? What do you like to do? Luigi likes to ride bicycles all over the country.
Okay. I love to read. I read every night. I read falling asleep. I love to read about history. It's my favorite subject.
What are you reading right now?
I'm reading a book on Scipio Africanus, the guy who defeated Hannibal in the Punic Wars for Rome. Probably Rome's greatest general.
The guy that wasn't afraid of elephants.
Wasn't afraid of elephants. Hannibal's colleagues killed his brother and father, and he at 25 went to Spain and actually kind of figured out how to beat them strategically instead of just trying to go win battles. It's a fascinating part of history. So I love reading about that stuff. And then, look, I've got a wife and 2 kids, so my hobbies have been really limited to my wife and kids for a while. My son is a junior, so I've got another year and a half, not even a year and a half at home with him. And then I'll probably actually start picking up some new hobbies. But yeah, right now, that's where I spend my time.
There's a great podcast you'd probably like. I don't know if you listen to it. It's called How to Take Over the World. And they do a deep dive into all
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's right. I think he's doing the Plutarch's Lives, right, where he compares a Greek to a Roman. And so, tying this back to small businesses, if you read about Greek history and the fall of the Mycenaean Empire, right, it's the Bronze Age, Dark Age, right, 1177 BC. It's coming out of that you have the emergence of the Greek city-states. And so, in my mind, what happened there is the kingdom falls, but you still have people living and they're farming. And so what happens is these neighbors get together and say, hey, the wolves are here. How do we fight them off together? And eventually, little towns form. But because they've been doing this collaboratively, as soon as a chief shows up or a king shows up, they're like, hell no, man. Why do you get to be king? We've been doing this side by side all along. I'm not giving this up. And so it's kind of interesting. If you look at, there's this thing called ostracism in the Greek world, which was once a year, the citizens of a town would vote on who to throw out. And they would typically throw out the person who was gathering the most power. And typically that was somebody who was building a big farm. And so the average Greek farm was 10 to 100 acres. And it was when you got bigger than 100 acres, like, hold on, you're trying to take control, you're out. And you'd lose everything. And you're out in the wilderness trying to find a new city state to take you in, right? The biggest example of it, not from an economic perspective, but was Themistocles after the Battle of Salamis, right, when they beat the Persians off, and then Athens is won, and Athens is like, hold on, you actually are the ruler now, you're out. And you're like, oh, but he just won, he just saved your life 6 months later.
Eric, but we have the same thing. We have the same thing in America. We just call it the FTC.
So I like all that, right? I think it's those individual business owners that from the Greek times forward have actually created individual liberty and this ability to figure out how to govern ourselves without tyrants and kings. And it was the fall of Rome that led to 1700 years of nothing but tyrants and kings with a few small city-states that might have had a little bit of independence until America. So I think this is a civilizational undertaking, right, to go help more business owners.
Hey, listen, I like it. I just learned something. Now I know where the word ostracized comes from. I think we need to take a page out of their playbook.
Oh, yeah.
Congress.
There's more than a few.
Oh, man. Eric, thank you so much for being here, man. I really enjoyed it, and we want to be respectful of your time. Can you tell everybody how they can either get in touch with you or go visit Onramp to check them out? Sure,
yeah. We're at onrampfunds.com. There's no funny spelling. It's just Onramp Funds, put it together.com. You can reach us on the website. Our phone number is there. Our emails are there. I'm Eric Youngstrom. I'm Eric at onrampfunds.com if you want to email me. And we're here to help small business owners grow their businesses.
Eric, last question before I let you run. So, what's your favorite type of coffee?
Oh, I've actually stopped being a coffee snob. I will happily drink the donut shop out of the Keurig. I'm happy to get really good coffee, but when it comes to it, I want it fully leaded and I want it now.
Are you black or cream and sugar?
Black.
I knew it.
Now, I will say at home now, what I've switched to is black tea, green tea, and reishi tea, because you actually it's this like turmeric ginger, but you actually get 3 different kinds of caffeine. And so it actually stretches that caffeine high out for like 4 or 5 hours instead of getting the high and then the come down. And so I really like that, right? It kind of makes it last longer.
So most people don't believe this, right? Because look, I'm 6'4", 280 pounds, right? People come over. I'm like, you want a cup of tea? Luigi doesn't even know this. I got all these teas, but I never heard of that one. So I got to go check it out. Eric, thank you
it was
so
Tim
much,
Ferriss, man. It's Tim Ferriss did that titanium tea stuff. It's kind of like bulletproof coffee.
Oh, is
but
that
he was
what it
using
is?
tea instead. That's where I learned about it. And it really does give you that it keeps the caffeine. It doesn't get as high, but it just keeps you even for like 6 hours. It's great. So I really kind of switched to that unless I just need a quick jolt from the coffee at the office.
Awesome. I got to check that out. Eric, thank you so much. Everybody, that's a wrap at the Liquid Lunch Project. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of the Liquid Lunch Project.